Hi, how you doing? Rev Fred here. Okay, so today I want to talk about being a servant. But the interesting thing is that I want to talk about active service. I want to talk about being a servant. Uh, the Bible talks about the fact that you're either a servant to one master or another master. And like it also says that you are a servant if you are a borrower. So, like, if you borrow money from an organization, then you are a slave or a servant to that organization. If you use wisdom that you receive from somebody who is not a believer, and you walk in that understanding, you walk in that room, then you are a servant to that information that you got from that person. You should only be a servant or a slave to God and only God. And that means you don't depend on the credit card company to make sure you pay your bills. It doesn't mean that you can't use them, but you don't depend on them. Who you depend on is God. You know that it's God's will that you get become wealthy and get out of your debt and to have all those things. So, but you also take actions and methods in order to make sure you're not spending overly. You are giving to where you need to give and not giving to where you don't need to give. And blessing when you need to, or when God puts it on your heart to. So it's interesting that, it says that we are a slave or a servant to one thing or another. And then it also says that you are either a slave to God or you're a slave to mammon. You are a servant to God or you're a servant to mammon. You can't love both. You either have to love one or love the other. It's pretty harsh because, it's like, God, are you saying that I can't have money? I can only have a reliance in you? Yes, that's what he's saying. But, money is not bad. It's the love of money. It's like when people say that, oh, even though the Bible does say it's very difficult for a rich man to get into heaven, it doesn't say it's impossible. The reason it's so difficult is because they depend so much on their wealth to provide for them all the things that they need to get that they forget that the only reason they have wealth is because of God. And that if their first focus was God was the one who brought me the wealth, God's wisdom, God's understanding, God's mercy, God's grace, all that stuff is what brought that to me, then their heart would be in the right place, and the money is not the thing that is in control of them. It's interesting because when the rich young ruler came to God and Jesus and said, I've kept all the commandments, I've done all these things, what do I need to do in order to have eternal life? And Jesus saw that he had the love of money in his heart, and so he said to him, sell everything you own, give your money to the poor, and follow me. And the rich young ruler walked away sad. Why? Because he wasn't going to do that. He wasn't going to trust God. He rather trust in his money. And so all Jesus was telling him at the time, was, you're trusting in your inheritance. You're trusting in your money. You shouldn't trust in that stuff. Trust in me and me alone. Doesn't mean you couldn't have the money. So it means that you needed to trust in God. And where did you get that money from in the first place? If it wasn't God who ordained you to get it, then what, the enemy that got you that money? I don't think the enemy would give money to somebody who they knew would become a believer, or they have no understanding about that at all. So, it's interesting to think about, like, when the Bible talks about that you're going to be a slave to one, or a servant to one, or a slave or a servant to another. We get to choose which one we decide we want to be a slave or a servant to. But we don't always know, that that's what we're doing. We don't understand that necessarily. We're like, okay, well, I love God, but, I need money. So, okay, so then How are you making your money? What are you doing? Are you obeying what God says to do and not to do? Are you cheating on your taxes? So who is more important? Like, if you're cheating on your taxes, are you implying that getting the money is far more important than doing what God is asking you to do, which is be honest and trustworthy? And maybe so. So maybe you have a God that's not the right God. You are a servant to the money and not to a holy God that wants you to walk in a certain way. I think that's an important thing for us to understand, because we are that way with everything. Are you a servant to the food you eat? Are you a servant to uh, the car you drive? Are you a servant to people who are around you? And that's not necessarily a good way. You should be a servant to people who are around you, but are you more interested on the people around you, what they have to say about you, than what God has to say about you? If you are more interested in what the people around you have to say about you than God, then you're a servant to them and not to God. And so the idea is that we serve only one God. We serve only one master. We don't serve any other masters. There's nobody else but God that we serve under. That means it's more critical what it says in the Word about us than what a psychologist might say about you. It's more critical than what the Word says about your finances than what an economic master or person would say, who is not based on the Word, is not based on biblical understanding of finances. So we need to make sure that our basis that we walk in is all biblical based and not worldly based. We don't want to be a lover of the world and keeping God at bay. We need to be a lover of God and walking in that. And the world may have its ways of thinking, but we got to make sure that it's not influencing the way God says we're supposed to do something. So what you're going to be a servant to, what you're going to be a slave to, you have to choose. You can choose. I don't know that necessarily in a lot of the situation that it's a salvation issue. I think it can be a salvation issue if you are grabbing your information from a worldly source about finances, for example, but you are a loving God and you are giving when He says to give, and you are giving your tithe and you're doing what you need to do, then I don't think you're in a bad place. I think you're in a pretty good place, even though you may be getting information from a source that's outside of what biblically you should be doing, as long as you're not cheating or lying when it comes to doing that. But if you are not interested in what God has to say, well, then I think it could be a salvation issue, It's the same thing with food. Like, if God's telling you not to eat something and you eat it, He's trying to tell you this for a reason. God is a very good master to follow, because He only has what's good for you. Anyway, that's all I have to say for today. Bless you. I hope this finds you well. Just know what and who you're following, because what and who you follow will determine what path you go down. Sometimes paths down the wrong path can be very subtle and unaware that you're going down the wrong way until you're already so far down the path that it's very difficult to get back up. So if you want to follow somebody, you make sure you follow somebody that has a biblical basis for their information that they're giving you. Because if it's outside of that, it could be complicated and difficult. I gain a lot of information from outside sources. I watch a lot of podcasts from people who are not believers, but it's never to gain the information that I'm looking for. It's more to verify that what God has given me matches up with other people who are thinking. And that's all I use it for. It's just more of well, God's showing me this. Well, what does the world say about that? And I'll look it up and find out what the world's saying about it. And scientists are determining this or that, the other thing. Well, this is what God just showed me. So I can say, okay, that seems accurate to me because of what God's showing me. That's it for me. So that's it. Okay. I love you very much. I love you very much. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. You know, one of the wonderful things about being a believer is a relationship with God. Yes, it's so critical. It's so wonderful to be able to spend time with God and feel His love coming back at me, and all that stuff is fantastic. But you know what it is? It's like there's a community. When you have a community of people that you interact with who can keep you accountable, who will encourage you, who you can encourage, who you can be there for, who want to be there for you, it's like an extended family situation, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. It really is. It really makes you feel like you're not alone. Even though you might be in a situation you feel like you're kind of alone in life and you're trying to get things going on your own, but the reality is you're not alone. You have a wonderful spiritual family that surround you who want to encourage you and lift you up, lift yourself up. Even sometimes in the situations where, like, I'm having discussions with the pastor that knows that it's possible that I might leave and go do something else, and he depends on me, and he's still encouraging that I follow after what God has gotten me to follow after, even though he knows it's going to cause him some difficulties at some point, and he would miss me. But he still loves me enough to say, well, if that's where God's leading you, then you need to go. So wonderful, 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 wonderful. Like, it makes a lot of difference in my life to be able to have people who love me enough to be there beside me and to encourage me, to lift me up, to, talk to interact with, joke and laugh around with. Yeah. It's a wonderful thing. If you don't have that in your life, I'm sure you can find a body somewhere that, a church that you can go to and be with and interact with and develop relationships. It's a very important thing to have. It's a critical aspect of our walk as Christians that we have this family. And we have family all over the world. Like, if you're a Christian, you have family everywhere. And there's no place that you cannot find a fellow Christian where you can interact with and fellowship and lift each other up. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. It really is. Okay. All I have to say about that. Okay, I love you very much. 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 I love you. Bless you in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.